Hey everyone, I just finished talking to Canadian International Award-winning tribute artist and actor Steve Michaels. On this segment, we talked about his humble roots in Milton, Ontario, childhood, the decision behind his name change, and becoming an Elvis tribute artist. All that and more coming up with Steve Michaels. And now let's get right into the episode. Good evening, Steve. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. How are you, first and foremost?
Really good. Busy, just editing, putting together, producing the upcoming Christmas show, putting the last few bells and whistles together, and premiering it tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. But first, let's talk about your childhood and sort of how you got to where you are today.
Okay.
So can you talk about sort of your life growing up?
Yeah, well, I mean, I life growing up wasn't really any different than any other kid. Just grew up in the Toronto area at first, and then moved to Milton, Ontario, as a kid, and went to school here, and that was pretty much it. But as far as yeah, just I was like a just a everyday kid who just found a love for Elvis Presley.
Right. And yeah, I was doing a lot of research about your whole story and how it came to be, and something fascinated within me to hear about the different records that you grew up listening to. People from the Everly Brothers to Roy Orbison, the Coasters, and was that sort of your nature of music growing up?
Yeah, well, my mom and dad had totally two different genres of music and loves for it. My dad was very much into big band, and my mom was more of the rock and roller, I guess you could say. And so it was a little Clash of the Titans musically within the house, and I just gravitated towards that yeah, the rock and roll, and that was again, like you've said them all, everything from the 50s, the 60s, the Frankie Valley. I did listen to them all right up, of course, through ABBA and Boney M, which was my dad's favorite when he wasn't listening to any of that big band stuff. And but yeah, it was a little bit of everything, but primarily it really did focus on Elvis. Elvis was around for every Christmas, every birthday, every celebration. And yeah, definitely Elvis. Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously you being a tribute artist, it's crazy to think that like one can idolize Elvis Presley and then two to imitate and be a tribute artist singing his songs and performing the style he does, but also doing the research of, many years of studying his dance moves and his character. How much of that went into really helping you build on to the production of doing these shows?
Yeah. Well, growing up listening to it, growing up watching it, it was pretty, it just, I guess you could say it was like osmosis. Musically, it was musical osmosis. It just sort of sunk in the pores. It took it in, and probably just being because such a I was such a fan of his and watching everything that he did, and it was on repeat. Anytime I watched it or I would listen to it, and it was just, I guess, you have 10,000 hours of practice even before I even started, because I was the kid that got up at the family parties and started emulating my rock and roll idol. And that's so when it was time, and it wasn't a transition, it wasn't a conscious transition to say, okay, I'm now going to perform Elvis. I fell into that. That's a completely different story we can touch on. And but as far as doing a lot of the training and practicing, would have started at a young age, just doing it for friends and family.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does the correlation with the performing arts have to do with your life growing up?
Well, oddly. And this is one of those moments that I wish I can go back to myself when I was a kid, just have a Marty McFly moment and go back and have a conversation with myself and say, you really will enjoy the performing arts. You will enjoy dance. You will enjoy singing. You will enjoy playing instruments. Give it a shot. That was in my family. My mom and my dad both wanted me to play a musical instrument. I was into everything else but that, and so I didn't. It wasn't for carrying a tune. It was one thing because you mean uh, when you first start out, if you're natural, you can sing, you can, on, and then some of us like myself went to coaching and vocal lessons later, but I never really did a lot of the performing arts when I was young and impressionable, I guess you can say. But like I'm my kids now, they're all doing it. So
Hmm. And also let's talk about competition and shows, and how that portrays in your life because you've done a lot of things when it comes to like talent shows and maybe like different competitions, like growing up. And so how did those experiences sort of help you become, what you are?
well, my first time publicly performing as Elvis was actually a lip sync in high school, and it was my buddy and myself, and everybody else was, of course, at that time. I'm dating myself now, but they were, it was Depeche Mode and The Cure and that kind of music, and then we decided that we were going to do Elvis Presley, and so that's how that happened. But so that would have been my very first time. And when I was worked at a local restaurant in my first year of working there, and this is how it all kind of happened. Was the first year I was working there. They had an Elvis night. Guy came in, did his thing, singing and performing as Elvis, and then I thought, wow, that's really cool. Maybe I'll give that a shot one day. And so then I started performing at the bar, on the bar, and singing and lip syncing there. And then it would have been in the late mid 90s, 96. I performed up in Collingwood, the Collingwood Elvis Festival for the very first time. And then that's when I really kind of caught the bug for it. Competed in the Collingwood Elvis Festival, I think 4 or 5 years. Always a bridesmaid, never a bride, and but I just never stopped wanting to perform, and so went stateside, and that's in 2001 is when I won my first competition, and then pretty much as soon as I won that competition, I started really concentrating on the business side of the music business. And so I wasn't in the competitive circuit for too long. And then I went back in, dipped my toe in again, 2009, and I may be foolish enough to get back into it this year. Who knows?
Hmm. And all those competitions and shows and experiences led you to becoming a successful international actor. So what did that have to do with everything else in between?
Yeah. Well, exactly. Well, and that's when I started honing my craft. I decided that I wanted to do more with it. I wanted to um, take my show outside, get out of the bars. A lot of times at that, the only place at one time for tributes, so a majority, if you weren't in Vegas, would be to work the bar circuit, and then I wanted out of the bars, so I was probably one of the first, if not the first, Elvis tribute in Southern Ontario to actually break out of the bars and start going into theaters, soft theater theaters, and cultivating that and producing my own shows. And then I was starting to get used to working on those types of stages. It opened up my audience. People got to see who I was all about. and then other producers were interested in me, and they sought me out, and I started working with them, and then we're lucky enough to be performing at the Ed Mirvish Theater, two times. First time two times at the Ed Mirvish Theater, one time at the Princess of Wales Theater with a show called Return to Grace, which then catapulted me into the league of where I always wanted to be, because now we're playing for thousands of people, doing a run in Toronto in the Toronto Theater District. Then I continued to hone my craft. Uh, Started working internationally over the course of from about 2000 up to present, pardon me, and then in 2018 I starred as Elvis Presley in a musical, a bio musical called This Is Elvis in England, and that was a 200 show run that took us all over the UK, and I don't know, I wasn't counting, but I think I sang over 8,000 Elvis songs, and and that's it, and so I just recently just got back from Australia on an Australian tour, so that's been great. But yeah, no, I uh, just continue to grow as an entertainer.
Hmm. And yeah, you're talking about a lot of these different experiences and opportunities that you got to perform in before you even became a huge Elvis tribute artist. And also I feel like all those things really help you create an identity about who you are. And so you also changed your name because you had Stephen Michael Kabakos.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah. And now you go by Steve Michaels. Why was the name change so important? Was that just to create more of a authentic identity to yourself?
Well, you know what? It was yeah, actually it was even simpler than that. Um it was it was because a lot of people couldn't say Quebecus. and 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 so there was more mispronunciations. You got it right away. But there was more mispronunciations, as more misses than there were hits. And so I just decided that, my dad always said, seal it with a kiss, and that's keep it simple, stupid. And I just said, well, my middle name is Michael. So I'll add an S, and I'll go by Steve Michaels. So that, and so I didn't feel that I was too far from who I always was, or I am, pardon me, because that's my name. And But yeah, there wasn't anything major. There wasn't any reason other than I just thought that it would be easier to just to go and have a stage name. That's it. Yeah.
Hmm. That's really interesting because I feel like a lot of people when they change their names, it's like I feel like a lot of the celebrities as well when they lose a bit of their fame that they had before, they have this word that they call, and I hate this word. I hate using this word. It's so cringy, but it's like reinvent, like. But like, do you feel like that sort of change in your life was sort of just to reinvent yourself and try to create a different sort of picture of who you are and also while honoring Elvis Presley at the same time?
Wow. Yeah, great question. I think the it wasn't so much, I mean, I myself didn't say, okay, I'm going to change my name and go with my first and middle name, and then drop my last uh, to become somebody else. It all pretty much was happening organically at the same time, and I think the it would it would be more so the people who don't realize that I'm the same person. And that happens to me a lot. I'll go to a show and somebody will say, "You're fantastic." And I say, "Well, thank you. I really appreciate that." I have one of my favorites. And I say, "Well, tell me who that is." Because everybody has their favorites. And they will say, "It's this guy named Steve Kabakis." And I said, "Well, oddly, that's me." And so they don't or they or so that a lot of times they don't realize that it is me, but the person that they're seeing, which is who they're Steve Michaels, is this great performer. But it's kind of it's very strange when that kind of thing happens. But I guess if you look at it this way, not so much a reinvention, but anybody who saw me grow with my using my first and last name, Stephen Kabakis, for 15, 16 years. And those who didn't know that I had a name change and use a stage name of Steve Michaels, they would come out and they would see Steve Michaels for the first time. But what they don't know is that at that time he had 15 years or I had 15 years experience. So they thought they were seeing somebody brand new and like, wow, look what this guy can do. And yeah, I hope that didn't sound too dual personality, but that's just the best way to describe it. That yeah, I think that's the best way to describe it.
No, absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right with that because there is that certain point where I feel like people will change um some part of them because, they don't want people looking at them as like, they're famous or they're a rich person, because they have such a gifted talent, right? And that's not what you are. That's really not what you are. It's basically, I feel like watching you, it's like I'm picturing what Elvis would do on stage, and then I'm seeing Steve Michaels, not Elvis Presley. I see Steve Michaels because that's what Elvis Presley was. It wasn't Elvis Presley, on stage. It was Elvis the man on stage, the human,
Mhm.
right? And so I feel like I want to ask this question because I felt this is interesting because I've never had someone explain this to me. But what is the difference between a tribute artist and an impersonator? Because they're two different things, and I feel like people put them together and think that they're identical things.
Right. Well, the term and it's evolved like the that it has really evolved like there is the term impersonator was one of those things that really came from the 70s and 80s and when you referred to an Elvis impersonator there was a lot of negativity around the word impersonator and then so this ETA Elvis tribute artist emerged and then you're paying tribute to him. You're not impersonating him, and I'm still kind of it's a fine line, right? Because at the to impersonate somebody would mean that you would you're thinking that you are, but it's just a it's very strange because oddly enough I was again because of my parents and the age that I grew up in. There was an impersonator by the name of Rich Little, and he was one of he still does all these incredible impersonations, and it's all vocal impersonations, and he sounds exactly like the people that he's supposed to be. And so in that case, what Rich Little does is impersonating other people. The tribute side would be that there's a little bit of yourself uh, bleeding into the character. I guess that it just happens again, like you said. We're not Elvis Presley, and if you are going to, you know, when I walk out on stage, there's a certain amount of humility that I still present. I am very aware that I'm not Elvis. If I went out with the attitude that I think I am Elvis, that would maybe lead more towards being an impersonator. Tribute is making sure that I get everything right. That uh, I have a mantra that is if he didn't do it, neither will I. And but I also know that in between, my personality also is coming out, and that's where the tribute comes. which so there's that fine line. Whereas when I was in This Is Elvis, as an actor, I was uh my job was to be him. So for that hour and a half, I was portraying Elvis Presley, like the actors that perform and play him in the movies. They're not, is it an impersonation or is it an act? So it is, it's like a thick stew, but yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's interesting. Because I remember watching this one kid um on the Ellen DeGeneres show, and he was performing Hound Dog, and he was asked, "What's the difference between a tribute artist and an impersonator?" And he says, "Impersonator is someone who mocks Elvis. A tribute artist is a guy who actually pays respect to the king of rock and roll, but also honoring him in the proper way that it should be.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's so interesting how that differs between each other. But now, as we talk about Elvis tribute artists, what do you feel are the most surprising moments yourself being an Elvis tribute artist and when you're on stage?
As of late, just ended up again coming back from Australia, was just how much uh, it's changed. The face, all the faces, they're getting younger. It's the movie has opened the doors to a younger audience, which I think is absolutely incredible. Which and they're 8-year-olds, there's 6-year-olds, there's four, there's teenage boys, girls. They're all there, and they're with, and I'm talking to them, and I'm talking to their parents, and then I said, like, who's the Elvis fan? And it's the parents saying, well, they brought me here. I'm not the Elvis fan. And so I think that's incredible. To I've been like performing for so long. There's not that many more surprises, but to see there, to get caught up in the moment, and being able to look into somebody's eyes if they're watching, and you can just see that little glimpse. There's that little spark that goes off in their eyes, because you've something just happened for them in a positive way, that they saw a glimpse of the man on stage, right? So that's always that's humbling and endearing all in the same time. So mhm.
Yeah, so let's talk about the hardest parts of being an ETA.
Hardest parts. Well, it's hardest part, huh? I can say jokingly, you can't put on any weight because you can't go to Walmart to buy yourself a new suit. um, the I think the hardest part is not to lose yourself in it. You can there's so many times, of course, when you do tour uh, around, and you do get looked after quite well, and the you can get caught up into that lifestyle, and the screaming fans, Elvis fans, and then those who have then also accepted myself as a performer, that they come out and the Steve fans. So I mean, you can get caught up in it. And I think that would be the only thing that you'd have to watch, is just to remain humble. Like, don't, when you're off stage, park it. That's what I do. It's just when I'm off stage, I'm myself. Can't get away from the black hair or sideburns, but I would think I would say that the hardest part would be not getting caught up in it.
hmm and so as we talk about the hardest parts, how do you manage those disappointments or adversity?
The Yeah, I mean, disappointments. You know what it would be? I think the disappointments would come from a side of, because that there's probably 50 or 60,000 Elvis tributes out there now that there's just some work that you would like. You have your buddy who's doing it, and you're like, son of a gun, I wish I was that guy on that stage. The But with every disappointment, there's always something incredible that comes out of it on the other side. I haven't had too many disappointments. Disappointments would probably be more weighed to not on the professional side, but more so on competitive side, because Elvis competitions are male equivalent to the beauty contest. Everybody thinks they're the prettiest. Everybody, the talent show is the singing, the gown is the jumpsuit, and everybody goes in wanting to win, but there can only be one winner. And so that's where you would handle the most disappointment, because you go in there to win. If you don't win, then you just have to, you know, grin and bear it and hope for the best. But yeah, and that's why I got out of competitions. It's just my heart couldn't handle it anymore.
Right, right. And so, what makes you different from other ETAs?
Oh, like the longevity of it. I've been performing it for been performing Elvis for many years, 26 years now. Um, when I first started, I had something different to offer, and then I've never stopped learning. I've never stopped perfecting. My mother said the day you think you've got him, and him being Elvis, is the day you get out of the business, because you'll never get him. Nobody will ever get him. And I think it's just that constant strive to get better, and not saying, okay, I got it. And it's just keep listening and keep practicing and just perfecting my craft. And so and I think that's what's kept me relevant in performing it, because I still, as the years will go by, you can't get away from the years. But I still love performing the 50s, and I still love performing the 60s, and the black leather and the movies. And so I still perform them all. And just but I'm having more and more fun with it as my confidence is growing as well. So
hmm and so that brings me to my next point of asking you about how long have you been learning sort of the art of the king?
I think since watching Aloha from Hawaii with my mom sitting on her lap, taking it in, studying it. But one thing I did do, I made a conscious effort of, again, going back and what I was saying before, if Elvis didn't do it, then I wouldn't. I watched countless hours of video, and uh, slowing things down to trying to figure out how he moved, how he did as pardon me, excuse me, let me say that again. Countless hours of how uh he moved, and making sure that I was getting it right. And yeah, that's yeah. I'm sorry. I apologize. I got sidetracked there because I dropped my water bottle. What was your question again? I'm sorry. Pardon me.
My question was, how long have you been learning the art of the
Yes.
king?
So, um, so that's it. When I decided that I was going to do this professionally, that I was going to make sure that I spent the time to learn it, to make sure it was in my head. So when I was performing on stage, it was coming natural, or it looked to come natural, and not like, oh, I've got to move this way and I have to move this way. Now I have to move here. It has to be a flow. I would say, there was that. It takes 10,000 hours to get good at something. I probably put about 20 in, maybe more, probably more, probably more.
hmm And so before we end this off, let's talk about your when you're on stage. And as a performer myself, at talent shows in my high school, I've done that for like what 4 straight years, I remember. And what's gotten me every time is the anxiety of having to perform every talent show, right? And people know me well there because I'm more of the main person that performs at the talent show. Right. And so it's like that anxiety where it's like before I even go on stage, people don't see this behind the curtains, but my knees are shaking. And then when I go on stage, they're all disappear.
Yes.
It's the whole thing. Do you ever deal with that? Like even right now, like how as long as you've been doing this, do you still get those nerves?
Yes. Yep. I do. It it varies. For instance, when I was in England with This Is Elvis and the 200 shows, the first night was just I was a wreck. And it was just because there was an hour of dialogue before the concert that we gave in the second half, making sure that I was, there was so many things that and breaking into new territory is what gets me nervous. I'm always have this. I do have butterflies. Have that energy that it's time to get out on stage. The so it's there's different levels. I guess it's all comes with comfort and being familiar with something. For instance, when we do the Christmas shows, I've performed the Christmas shows and the music so many times over the last, well, forever. And but it's going to be the first Christmas show that I'm going to have that moments of anxiety because it's here we go again. And yeah. But you as yourself as a performer, you you use that to your you use that in to your own benefit.
hmm and so as we're wrapping this up, I want to ask you, what brings you the most joys in life?
My kids, my wife, um, just smiles, seeing people, you know, having a successful show, just being, just yeah, it's. But definitely, I know it's yeah. I mean, you hear that all the time. It's my kids and my wife and stuff, but it is like I mean, having a support of my family to do this is not easy. Being married to Elvis, and I was just away for 51 days. So it's just to have that this the stability. But no, it's just everything. And it's yeah, that's what makes that's and seeing the smiles on a again, there's the personal side, which is one thing, and then on the professional side, just knowing that we're making people happy, or I'm making people happy with my tribute to Elvis. I mean, it's pretty wild that I'm having this conversation with you. And that you actually want to talk to me. And that makes me happy, to think that that there's people actually want to hear my story. So that's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. Would never have thought that 26 years ago.
hmm and my last two questions are, and my second last question is, who is a famous friend or person you can call for advice or to just to check in with?
Boy, well, I do check in quite a bit with my manager Mark. He always gives me sound advice about what direction I should be taking something. Uh, my mom, if mom shoots from the hip, and she'll so if I have to ask her anything, she's always there. And then the my wife is also a professional dancer. She's been in plays. She's been toured the world in the UK, and so sometimes if I just need to get a little bit of advice um, when it comes to a show, I talk to her as well because I know that she has my back.
And the last question is, what's your number one advice for aspiring tribute artists or actors?
Learn from Elvis. Watch Elvis. Don't you can have your favorite tribute artist. I have my favorite tribute artist. Um, but if I'm going to learn from that tribute artist, then it's like a photocopy. It's like the first generation photocopy, and I'm finding that's more and more the case nowadays. It's if you want to perform Elvis, perform, uh, do your homework and sit there with the king. Your homework and your studying shouldn't necessarily be your favorite Elvis tribute artist because it's just going to be a photocopy after a photocopy after photocopy after photocopy. So I would say go to the source and then just take it seriously.
Hmm. Well, while we've been having a great deep conversation, our time together has ended. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me. To the listeners who made it this far into the episode, thanks so much for sticking around. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Canadian International Award-winning tribute artist and actor Steve Michaels. You can find him on Instagram at Steve Michaels as Elvis and on Facebook, Steve Michaels as Elvis. For more info, visit elvisandco.ca/artist/Steve-Michaels/. If you'd like to help spread the word about my podcast, please do feel free to share with others, post about it on social media. Any form of support is greatly appreciated. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok, and on YouTube. So you can also find my show on all podcast streaming platforms just by typing in the JIGME KELSANG Show. I've been your host, JIGME KELSANG. Thanks for tuning into this episode.